The late afternoon sun poured through the wide glass windows of Green Mart, casting long golden stripes across the polished floors. The store hummed with familiar sounds, the squeak of shopping carts, the beeps of barcodes at checkout, the chatter of tired parents coaxing restless children. David, the store manager, moved with practiced efficiency through the aisles, offering quick smiles and helping hands wherever needed. He had worked here for years, knew the regulars by name, and took quiet pride in making sure every customer left feeling welcomed. But today, his attention snagged on something unusual, a boy no older than 8, standing alone by the bread section. The boy's clothes were faded, too small for his growing frame, and his shoes were scuffed down to the soles. What caught David most, though, was his expression. The child's eyes locked onto a simple loaf of white bread as if it were treasure, his small hands clenched at his sides, his lips pressed tightly together. There was a look of longing there that David knew all too well. He had grown up in a home where food wasn't always guaranteed, where some nights dinner was nothing more than a piece of toast and water. That memory stirred something deep inside him. He approached slowly, careful not to startle the boy. "Hey there, champ," David said gently, crouching down to his level. "You waiting for someone?" The boy looked up, startled, but didn't answer. His stomach gave a small, audible growl, and he dropped his gaze in embarrassment. David softened. He could see the hunger written across the child's face. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. For a moment, the boy hesitated, as if unsure whether to admit it. Finally, he gave a tiny nod. That single movement pierced through David's chest. Here was a child, standing in a store filled with food, and yet unable to have even a single bite. Without a second thought, David stood and reached for a pre-made sandwich from the cooler nearby. He added a small pack of apple slices and a bottle of water. He handed them to the boy with a warm smile. "Here, buddy, this one's on me. Eat up, okay?" The boy's eyes widened, disbelief flickering into relief. His small fingers wrapped tightly around the food as if afraid someone might snatch it away. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice so quiet it almost disappeared into the store's noise. In that moment, David felt a wave of peace wash over him. It was a simple act, nothing grand, but he knew it mattered. Sometimes the smallest kindness was the difference between despair and hope. Watching the boy take his first eager bite, David thought of his own childhood, when a neighbor once shared a warm meal with his family during their hardest times. That memory had never left him. He had promised himself, back then, that whenever he had the chance, he would do the same for someone else. But not everyone in the store saw it that way. From across the aisle, a supervisor, Ms. Clark, had been watching. She was known for her strictness, always quick to enforce every rule. Her sharp heels clicked against the tile as she stormed toward them, her face pinched with fury. "David," she barked, her voice cutting through the air. Shoppers turned their heads, sensing the tension. David rose slowly, standing between her and the boy. He was hungry, he explained calmly. "I couldn't just let him stand there." Ms. Clark's eyes narrowed. "Company policy is crystal clear. Nothing leaves unpaid. No exceptions." She crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. "You're the manager. You should know better." The boy froze, clutching the sandwich closer to his chest, as if bracing for it to be ripped away. David felt his protective instincts flare. He stepped forward slightly, his tone firm. "Then I'll pay for it. Myself. But I wasn't going to watch a child starve in my store." "But Ms. Clark shook her head. "It's not about the cost, David. It's about rules. If everyone started giving away food, we'd be out of business. You've crossed a line, and you know it." David felt a sinking weight settle into his stomach. He had worked here faithfully for years, giving his best, building relationships with customers and mentoring younger employees. And now, because he chose compassion over regulation, it was all unraveling. Ms. Clark didn't wait for further argument. Her voice rang out cold and final. "You're done here. Clean out your office immediately." Gasps rippled from a few nearby shoppers. A mother shook her head in disapproval at Ms. Clark's harshness, but no one dared to speak up. David stood frozen, his chest tight, his throat dry. He wanted to argue, to fight for his job, but when he glanced at the boy, still clutching the food, looking torn between guilt and gratitude, he knew he wouldn't take it back. If losing his job was the price of a child's full stomach, so be it. Silently, David walked to the front of the store. He removed his name badge, placed it neatly on the counter, and collected his few belongings. His coworkers avoided his eyes, though some offered small, sympathetic glances. Finally, he stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face like a wake-up call. The familiar hum of traffic surrounded him, but inside he felt hollow, stripped of the stability that had carried him through so many years. Still, despite the sting of injustice, one truth anchored him: he had done the right thing. Somewhere behind him, a little boy was eating, no longer hungry, no longer alone. And for David, that meant more than any paycheck. He sat down on the curb outside the store, his thoughts spinning, wondering what he would tell his family tonight. But even through the uncertainty, there was a quiet pride in his heart. Sometimes kindness came at a cost, but it was always worth paying. The evening air had grown cooler by the time David found himself sitting on the curb outside Green Mart, his elbows resting on his knees, his head bowed low. Cars came and went from the parking lot, their headlights flashing across his tired face. He clutched the small cardboard box that held the contents of his office, some papers, a framed photo of his daughter, and a coffee mug his coworkers had given him years ago. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented: years of dedication reduced to a box and a dismissal. He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. Anger and sadness churned inside him, but above it all was a quiet resolve. He kept replaying the boy's eyes in his mind, the mixture of fear, hunger, and gratitude. That image steadied him. At least he ate, David whispered to himself. At least he ate tonight. Just as he was about to rise and walk home, a sleek black car glided into the lot, pulling up near the entrance. It wasn't the kind of vehicle that usually stopped at a grocery store. The tinted windows reflected the store's glowing sign, and the polished chrome caught the last rays of the setting sun. David didn't pay much attention at first. People came and went all the time. But when the driver stepped out in a crisp suit and quickly moved to open the rear door, David's curiosity stirred. From the car emerged an older man, his presence commanding without him saying a word. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and silver hair spoke of wealth and authority. But it wasn't his appearance that struck David, it was his expression. The man looked tense, his brow furrowed as though carrying a heavy weight. He ignored the entrance of the store entirely and instead scanned the lot. His eyes landed on David. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward him. "David Turner?" the man asked, his voice low but steady. David blinked in surprise. "Yes, that's me," he said slowly, unsure how this stranger knew his name. The man extended a hand, firm but warm. "I'm Henry Reynolds. I own Green Mart." The words made David's stomach clench. He stood quickly, clutching the box tighter. He had heard the name before. Everyone in the company had. Reynolds was the Billionaire founder, rarely seen at individual stores, a man whose decisions rippled across thousands of employees. David braced himself for another lecture, perhaps even further humiliation. "Mr. Reynolds, I know what I did went against policy, but..." Reynolds raised a hand gently, stopping him. His eyes softened, though they still carried a gravity that made David's throat tighten. "I didn't come here to scold you. I came here because I needed to thank you." David stared at him, bewildered. "Thank me?" Reynolds exhaled slowly, as if the words were heavy to carry. "That little boy you gave food to, he's my grandson." The parking lot seemed to fall silent. The hum of engines, the chatter of passing customers, all of it faded as David tried to process what he had just heard. "Your grandson?" "Yes," Reynolds nodded, his voice trembling slightly now. "He had a fight with his parents earlier today. Ran away. Too proud to come back right away, too hurt to ask for help. He hadn't eaten since yesterday." His jaw tightened as he spoke, his hands clasping together. "We searched everywhere. I can't tell you the panic that consumed our family. And then, I learned what happened here. That a stranger, instead of turning him away or scolding him, showed him kindness." David felt his chest tighten. The boy's small voice, "Thank you," echoed in his memory, now carrying an even deeper weight. "I built this company from nothing," Reynolds continued, his gaze drifting toward the glowing store sign. "And somewhere along the way, I let rules and policies overshadow the humanity we should never lose. You reminded me tonight of something I had forgotten, that people come before profit. That compassion matters. For a moment, neither man spoke. David shifted uncomfortably, the cardboard box still in his arms, unsure what to say. Finally, he managed, I only did what anyone should do. He was hungry. I couldn't just stand by. Reynolds' eyes met his, and David saw something raw there, something beyond gratitude. It was humility. No, Reynolds said firmly. Not everyone would have done what you did. That's what makes it so important. He stepped closer, placing a hand on David's shoulder. I understand you were fired. That was a mistake, one I intend to correct immediately. But I don't just want you back in your old position. His voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. I want you to lead something new. I want every store in this chain to be a place where no child goes hungry. A community outreach program, food banks, meal drives, partnerships with shelters. And I want you to run it. David's breath caught. The weight of his box, the sting of his dismissal, the uncertainty of his future, all of it melted away, replaced by a rush of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Mr. Reynolds, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Reynolds replied with a faint smile. Because the world needs more people like you in positions where they can make a difference. Tears welled in David's eyes, unexpected but unstoppable. He had always believed kindness mattered, even when it cost him. Now, standing here, he realized that single act of compassion had not just fed a hungry boy, it had opened a door to something greater than he could have imagined. He nodded, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, absolutely, yes. Reynolds squeezed his shoulder firmly, then stepped back. Good. Then let's change this company, and maybe even a little piece of the world, together. As the billionaire walked back to his car, David stood there, the evening air cool against his damp cheeks, his heart pounding with hope. What had begun as the worst day of his life had turned into something extraordinary. One choice to feed a child, one moment of compassion, had rewritten his entire future. And as the car drove away, David whispered to himself, almost in awe, sometimes, kindness doesn't just change a moment, it changes everything.